Hello there ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to what I painted this month for February 2016. We are a few days into March at the moment, but I haven't really had a chance to work on this with a plethora of videos being put out, and also working on some projects such as Cheeks. If you don't know what that is, then you should look further down my video list. Now, last month I did say I was going to be painting a lot of terrain. However, as it turned out, I was only able to get the Dragonfate dais and some objective markers done because the large castle that I wanted to paint was put on hold significantly because my airbrush clogged up, so I couldn't really prime it very easily. So I've got that partially done, but not in a finished state, so I'm hoping to get at least a piece of that done during this month. However, with the extra time that freed up, I was able to get some Kings of War goblins done, as you can see. And the objective markers that I mentioned are from Ristall's Extraordinary Market. So let's start with those treasure markers, shall we? From Ristall's Extraordinary Market, which I purchased via the Dice Bag Lady. 8 of them. 2 of them were struggling to fit on small bases, especially the large one with the throne. So I decided that I'd have 6 on the smaller bases and 2 large. I believe they were originally designed for Frostgrave, but I plan on mostly using them for Age of Sigmar. And for other games, often the maximum number of objectives you can have is 6, so having 6 of them on the smaller bases will come in very handy there, and the 2 larger ones for when I need these special objectives as well. They're made out of resin, and they are incredibly high quality. I don't remember seeing a single mould line. Of course, with them being completely flat on the bottom, I would imagine that's how they avoid mould lines. You can see them from above there. You can see that some of them are struggling to fit on those bases, some of them smaller than others. So if you wanted to use some of them for just general basing or for other purposes, then that'd be great. Any game that has different sizes of treasure, you can see them from the back here. You can see the back of the throne, which has a nice design on there. The gold coins were painted in the same way that I paint my Stormcast Eternals. It was the gold colour that you can see on the throne there originally, then a wash over it, and then highlighted with the Ye Olde Citadel Shining Gold, which is why the gold coins are much lighter than the throne and the chests and the other gold items. Also, I've gloss varnished all of these 100%, even the parts that are wood, just because I want the whole thing to give off a very shimmering look. And to illustrate that, I took some pictures of them in the sunlight. So you can see here, this is what they look like with the sun coming in through the window. You can see how deliciously shiny they are. For the gems, I didn't do anything particularly fancy with those. They're just in a dark colour and then just picked out the edges in a lighter version of that colour, for the most part. With the yellow gems, I did the edges in white and then went over with a yellow wash, because I thought the white was a bit too odd looking. And a nice close-up of the corpse on the throne here. These are actually very, very good value, these treasure markers. Very, very decent price indeed. So I would definitely recommend them. And some of the other items that they have are nice as well. They do some crystals and various other terrain accessories. They do unopened treasure chests as well, but I didn't really want any of those because most of the time I'm going to be using these as piles of your gold for Age of Sigmar, so I wanted the gold to be clearly visible. Next up, we've got some more Kings of War goblins. Now, my army prior to these was sitting around about 1,300, 1,400-ish points, and I wanted to get it up to 2,000 because I want to use it in tournaments. And even now I still have to really kit the whole army out with the most expensive artifacts possible to get it up to 2,000. So the War Trombone is something I've wanted for a while. That's really nice for defending against flyers because it can just spin round on the spot and shoot wherever it feels like with no penalty. It's quite short range, but for that role it's going to be fine. Moving it up with the troops and still being able to shoot is very handy as well. And another regiment of Spitters. I've already got a horde of these guys, but I had some more left over on the sprues, so I decided to make up another unit of them to just crank a few more points into the army. As always with my Kings of War goblins, very, very simple to paint. Mostly just base coat and washes, and then in the case of the skin and some of the other parts, going over with the original colour again. On these guys there isn't a huge amount of highlighting going on. You can possibly see from the side there's a little bit of highlighting on his little purple tail thingy on the back of his hat, the leader at the front there, but mostly just washes. The basing is obviously the most unique part about my Kings of War goblins. Not many people go for that kind of snow look. See a close-up of the goblins here, so I think it's important when you're using such a basic paint scheme to actually go to the trouble of picking out as many eyes as possible and all the teeth. just to give them something, otherwise they would look incredibly basic. I'm not the biggest fan of these particular goblins, as they don't really look like they're firing their bows at all, the way their arms are positioned. But one thing I discovered is that if you tilt the arms back a bit over the top of their head, like you can see on the right, it does actually look like he's retrieving an arrow from his quiver there. And here you can see the war trombone, which is again very simple, just brass and silver, and then washes, and then on the top there's some red for whatever they use to create the flames. This is the base that it comes with, but it's intended that you put the crew on separate 20mm square bases, but I didn't want to do that because everything else in my goblin army is just on one base for the unit. So as you can see, the guy that's supposed to be aiming the gun, there's no way he was going to fit onto that base without hanging off the edge horribly, so I've put him on the side instead, so it looks like he's making some kind of adjustment rather than actually firing it, just so I can fit everything onto that base. It doesn't look silly that he's not actually firing the gun, because if you think about it, with War Machine crew generally usually have one of them surveying the battlefield, one of them holding some kind of ammo, and maybe one of them pointing. You don't usually have one of them actually firing the weapon, and that's what it's going to look like to my enemies just before they get roasted. If you haven't heard me mention this recently, when discussing how I've painted my Kings of War units, then I've found that it's very important when putting down the PVA glue to apply the snow, mixing in some white paint with it, because any kind of inconsistency in the level of the base, if it's a little bit lumpy and you're using PVA, then it can turn yellow through the snow, and nobody wants yellow snow, let's be honest. So mixing in a bit of white really minimises that effect, and it's still nice and sticky as well. So now we're on to the Dragon Fate dais, which was very easy to paint. It did take a while obviously because it's quite big. I was weighing up in my mind how exactly I was going to do it, and in the end I decided to just keep it very simple. So it's just sprayed in a dark grey with the airbrush. Then I've just gone in and dry brushed the whole thing with white, specifically all the edges. So that is really the extent of the work that's gone into the stone on it. You can see it from some different angles here. The metal parts are just brass with a wash over it. The skulls are very easy as well. Skull colour, Agrex Earthshade, dry brush of skull colour over that. The flames are just a very light blue, with a blue glaze over the top, which is the same way I did the eyes actually, which you can see nice and clearly here, with a Stormcast Eternal standing on there for scale purposes. So the eyes have the glaze, and then I've gone over the bottom half of the eye with that blue again, so it's lighter, which brings a little bit more to it, I think. Got quite a nice close-up here where you can see that little bit of lighter eye on the bottom. Then underneath, I don't know if you can see very well, but there's kind of a slime pool going on there, which is just green, and then Tamir clear green over the top of that. So I think it's quite effective, and it's going to look pretty tasty for Age of Sigmar. I didn't varnish it or anything just because it's so large, and I don't think it's going to be manhandled that much. So there's everything I got painted for February. For March, well, I've already got a few things part way painted on the table at the moment. I've got a Reaper Bones Frost Giant Princess for my Goblin army for Kings of War, and I've got some converted Goblin Fleabag Sniffs, which are the Fleabag riders that have bows, and I'm hoping to get some of that castle finished as well. And I've also got Stormcast Eternal Vandus Hammerhand, being a little bit inspired by seeing the Dracoth riders that have just been leaked. I might have to crack on with him a bit, see if I can get him finished this month as well. So I hope you enjoyed this look at my wonderful painting. I'm sure you were all drooling at my level of excellence that continues to improve on a monthly basis, and I will talk to you again next time. Ta-ta, ladies and gentlemen.